And so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Orv, our host for this session. And Orv, go ahead, over to you.
Thank you, Albert. And guys, thank you for letting me present this morning. You said I'm a co-host, right, Albert?
Yes.
All right, let's see if I can mess this up totally. Okay. Share that. Go like that. How's that?
Looks good.
Okay. Anyway, there are various ways to create ham radio networks. We're going to talk about AREDN, which is arguably the most popular version. First, I want to talk about data rates for digital modes. And by data rates, I'm talking about modulation rates, not throughput. You all know if you had a dial-up modem back in the day, if it was 56K, you never got 56K end to end, and it's the same with the ham radio digital modes. Packet is 1200 baud, and a baud is one line transition per second, and it's different for different modes, but for the one that packet radio uses, one baud is 1 bit per second. And in modem terms, that's 0.0012 megabits per second. Wasn't especially fast in the 80s, and it hasn't improved any. Pactor 4, which is not legal in the US, except under certain conditions, you can get up to maybe 5 kilobits per second. VARA is a software modem, runs on Windows. With the right radio and interface, you can get up to 25 kilobits on VHF and UHF channels. And the AREDN network links that we're going to be talking about can be more than 100 megabits per second. A little asterisk there reminds me, that's true if you're running a 20 megahertz wide channel. Here in Southern California, we standardized on 10 megahertz wide channels, quite a few years ago. So our maximum network link, RF link speed is about 74 megabits per second. And I have seen that briefly. So anyway, the software as of today supports 4 different brands of equipment, over 70 different models across 4 ham bands, and you can see the asterisk around the 4. AREDN supports 900 megahertz gear. With that asterisk, there's just a few 900 megahertz channels. We share them with all the ISM gear, so it's quite noisy. And the gear was discontinued a number of years ago, so you can find it on eBay, and it's gotten quite expensive. While it will go a little farther, you can do better with other channels. It also supports 2.4 gigahertz, but we only have 1 channel area. You can't spread your traffic across channels, so you're stuck with the same packet collision domain. Also supports 3 gigahertz, but last month the FCC took away half of it. There's no Part 15 3 gigahertz gear, so we have to get European, and it's gotten quite expensive. So that leaves 5 gigahertz, and fortunately it works well. The gear is not expensive, and we have lots of channels. Like the gentleman who was bought his Ubiquiti gear, or whatever brand he bought to run AREDN, and he found himself in an RF desert. You can tunnel between nodes and get on the network, and a lot of people do that just to get on the network until they get an RF link going. So the secret sauce of the AREDN code, it will allow the radios, it will configure the radios to move out of the noisy Part 15 channels into the adjacent Part 97 ham radio only channels. And as you can imagine, they're quite a bit quieter, and that greatly improves the performance. They run 802.11n, which understands MIMO, which is multiple input, multiple output. What that means is there's 2 transceivers in all of the gear that AREDN recommends, going to 2 antennas.
Close on the side, right? Thank you.
one vertically polarized and one horizontally polarized, and I'll talk more about that. 802.11n knows how to take advantage of MIMO. And setting up a network from scratch can be pretty challenging unless you're really deeply into IP networking. Fortunately, the AREDN nodes provide a DNS server and a DHCP server, and they figure out the routes, so you don't have to do anything. So all of those put together make it pretty easy to get networks going. So once you load the AREDN code on a wireless access point, they call them nodes, and it's off-the-shelf hardware. We no longer need to do any hacking or hardware mods. When they come up, they find each other and create an IP network, just like the internet, only not as fast and not as large. You have to kind of consider them like handy talkies. They're low power. A few of them go up to a watt, but the vast majority are 600 milliwatts or less. And with the channels they're on, they are strictly limited line of sight. There's no knife edge refraction like you might find on VHF and UHF. So you usually end up communicating through a hilltop radio site. With a handy talkie, it's a repeater. With these, it's a hilltop node. Because the routing protocols will pick the best route, it'll always pick the strongest one, even if it hears more than one. So there's no point in running an Omni. So focus all your power in the best direction. I've updated this graphic over the years. The hardware's gotten better and better. Last night I had to add the asterisk to 35 because something that I had known but never thought about. You can go a long ways with these, but because of the slow speed of light, the farther you go out, the longer it takes to get an acknowledgement back, and the slower the data rate is. You can do 35, 45. We've heard of one 45-mile link, but they have to go to a 5 megahertz bandwidth, and that limits their data rate. You're probably better off with 2 or 3 hops in between. Unlike packet, where the latency is so huge, you want to minimize the number of hops. This stuff is so fast, a couple of extra hops does not hurt your latency at all. So you've built up this great infrastructure like we have in Southern California, but it doesn't do anything. It's just meant to get you to stuff you can use, and those are called services. I'm not going to read off all of these. You can look at them. You can put up pretty much anything you want on this network as long as it meets the Part 97 regulations. I'm going to run through some examples here. If you've ever used Slack, you know it's an online communications tool. There are open source versions that are free. Mattermost and Rocket Chat are 2 examples I've seen used. We use Mattermost locally. They'll carry text, you can post pictures, multiple channels available, and they all take advantage of that. If you're running, say, a Mattermost server, you can check into the web interface, or you can load the app on pretty much any computer or phone you have. Here's an example. This was posted by Eric, KG6WXC, a couple years ago. He was out camping in the high desert the night of the Ridgecrest 7.1 earthquake. They were out on the flat in a tent. And they got bounced around real well, no harm. The next day, he drove over and took a picture of the surface rupture and shared it with us. Now, the mesh network, the ham radio network, doesn't go out into the high desert yet. But because we have 2 Mattermost servers, one on the mesh network and one on the internet tied together, he was able to take a picture of this with his phone, post it to the internet mesh server, and those of us at home on the mesh network, he posted it to the one on the internet. It got shared over to the one on the mesh network, and we were able to see it. So it's pretty handy, and quite a few of us hang out on the local one, and I'm sure there's others elsewhere. This photo is getting really old. A number of years ago, when we were getting ready to, when we were deploying the network admin decided we needed a VoIP PBX there. Because he wasn't into Linux yet. He's still working on it, work in progress. He decided to buy a turnkey PBX. This is a Grandstream. It's one of their lower end, but it's still got more capabilities than we'll ever use. It was under $300. This was pre-deployment. That's an old Cisco phone I bought for testing off of eBay, 30 bucks or something. So it got deployed quite a few years ago. You can see it in the red ellipse there. This is in the repeater rack on top of Sulphur Mountain, which is south of Ojai, California. We have about 30 extensions. Most of them are at hams homes, but where we push the mesh network out to a served agency, we give them a phone and an extension. And because we run a Grandstream PBX, we encourage people to use Grandstream phones because they integrate a little better and you can manage them a little bit better centrally. And you can see there I missed a phone call and somebody left me a voicemail. And the PBX has all the features you'd expect. Call waiting, call forwarding, conference bridges are handy. So it works real well. This is the second PBX I deployed. It's a Raspberry Pi 3 running free PBX. Because the mesh network extends from Ventura County east into LA County, I put this PBX on Verdugo Peak, and I trunked the two together. I created pseudo area codes. So somebody on a VoIP phone on the mesh network in the San Fernando Valley can call me over in Ventura County by prefixing my extension with an 805 area code, and it will ring on my phone. We have 3 or 4 other PBXs in various states of trunking. And there's a couple of very active ones out in your area. Collaboration servers are what you've seen the gamers use in movies and TV. Lets them coordinate their teams. There's a lot of them. If you go to Wikipedia, there's a list of over 24 of them. TeamSpeak, Mumble, TeamTalk, those are all examples. And they all have very similar feature sets. I'm sure there's more than here I'm showing here. Voice and video chat, file sharing, desktop sharing. I'm sure there's more. We chose TeamTalk because it's one of the few that doesn't mandate encryption. So we got to avoid that whole encryption discussion. It has chat rooms, many to many, as you'd think, one-on-ones. You can set up as many channels as necessary. You can use the speaker and microphone on your laptop or a USB headset, which is better. Unlike a repeater where you have to wait for the guy on the other end to finish yapping, these are full duplex conversations. You can interrupt the person you're talking to, and it results in a much more natural conversation. And if you have multiple channels, you can have people spread out across the channels and they can have simultaneous full duplex conversations. If you're worried about load on the network, I believe in watching it when somebody's talking with the highest codec voice quality, it's about 30 kilobits per second. And given that, at least out here in Ventura County, we can handle 3 to 5 megabits per second across the network, you can have many, many, many simultaneous voice conversations. This is not your father's FM repeater. This is not 300 or 3000 hertz audio channels. Typically, the connections are good enough to where the codecs and the phone shift to their highest quality voice, and it's very good audio quality. The client can use push to talk. You assign a key on your keyboard for push to talk. Typically, we use left alt, but it depends. You can use voice operated transmit if you've got a quiet background, or something we haven't used, but I could see being used in an emergency situation is open mic. Two parties go over to a separate channel and they stay keyed up. 24/7. I could see that between, maybe a fire base camp and some other site. Somebody could come in and say, hey, I need to talk to Bill. And the other end says, hang on, I'll go get him. So it's a very real time. We have a weekly net, voice net on the mesh network. And I'll close the doors to the office here, put on my headset, switch it to Vox, and put my feet up on the desk and have a very, very natural conversation for a while. In many cases, the audio is like the person is in the room with you. For those of us whose hearing may not be as good as when they were young, it's a pleasure to listen to. Here's the interface. It looks pretty much the same regardless of what computer you're running. On the left, you can see the people who are logged in. When a person is talking, the background behind their call is green. And when they stop talking, it turns yellow. So you can see that Dave KM6FQ was the last person to talk. Down at the bottom, I've created a couple aux channels. You could call them whatever you want, Basecamp 1, SAG2, whatever. If you wanted to talk to somebody privately, you both would double click on one of those channels and your conversation would be transferred over there, and you could continue talking independently of everybody else. When you're done, you double click on I call it the root channel, but it's up at the top, and you return to the main channel. There's 4 tabs across the top, chat, video, desktops, and files, and they're pretty much for what you'd think. And here's the video. We don't find the video adds a lot to a net. Voice is usually more than sufficient. But once in a while, we have everybody fire up the webcams, and we stress test the network and the server. There's 7 QSOs going here, so that's 7 simultaneous video streams going up to the server and 7 coming back. Pretty much everybody runs 640 by 480 video at about 15 frames per second. And that's about 100 kilobits per second video. So you've got 700 kilobits going up and 700 kilobits coming back on a network that on a good day can support 5 megabits per second. So you can see it's not stressing the network at all. This TeamTalk server runs on a Raspberry Pi 3, and while we were doing this, I checked the CPU, and it had 10% network utilization and 10% CPU utilization. So I/O does not stress a computer that much. So yeah, you can run pretty much anything. I need to talk a little bit about the background about this photo. In late 2016, the AREDN software had matured enough to where we could start pushing out production backbone networks. So here in Ventura County, we started putting network nodes at various hilltops that we already had access to, repeater sites, and linking them together and putting a user access point, a network node that ground level users could connect to, thereby creating a hub and spoke network. And at this site, which is Sulphur Mountain, which I mentioned, had a repeater site on the north end of the property, which is privately owned. And we threw up a video camera that somebody had laying around just for the heck of it. And in September of 2017, another tech specialist in the section, Ben AI6YR, whose call sign may be familiar because he got a lot of publicity for finding a lost hiker a number of months ago. Anyway, he sent me a link to an article that told how to link webcams, stream webcams to YouTube. He says, check this out, see if you can figure it out, and we may use it sometime. Well, I messed around with it and sent him a link to a YouTube video of my driveway because I had a test camera out there. So I put it away and didn't think anything about it. But in late December 2017, Ben pinged me again because he keeps a close tab on emergency communications in Ventura County and said, hey, there's a fire near Santa Paula. Don't we have a camera up there? Well, we did. different brand, different model, different operating system, but I was able to get it working in fairly good order. And this is what we saw. The fire broke out near Santa Paula, near Thomas Aquinas College. And it was a typical Santa Ana Wednesday, hot, dry, gusty, and you can see the fire approaching over the hill. We were able to stream this video for a couple of hours until an intermediate link lost Edison power. At that point in time, we didn't have backup power anywhere. More on that later. After we lost the video link, the fire proceeded down across the hill, and you can see the light illuminating the owner's driveway there. Wiped out the driveway and the light, proceeded down almost to the bottom of the picture, turned west to the left, proceeded to the west to at the very edge of the owner's property, like 100 yards away from the tower, proceeded west and pretty much ravaged the town of Ventura. So lessons learned, backup power everywhere. Don't talk about using the network for emergency services until you have a robust network. You need backup power. And pan-tilt zoom cameras everywhere. It was fortunate this camera was pointing in the right direction, but that was just luck. A few days after this happened, I got an email from a fire inspector from the Ventura County Fire Department asking for the URL of the video on YouTube, and it was still there because they store them. He thanked me. Never heard anything directly back, but we did hear indirectly later that they found it useful because it was the first video existing of the fire. Next year, every year in June, the county board of supervisors proclaims it, ham radio month. And in 2018 in June, their proclamation specifically mentioned this video. So we got some good publicity out of it. So anyway, in 2018, we were working at making the network more robust, expanding it where we could, and trying to make it a little more robust. And sure enough, November of 2018, we got the Woolsey Fire. This is a pan-tilt zoom camera. This is on the north end of Simi Valley, my town, which is just over the county line from LA County. Woolsey Canyon is off the screen to the left about 4 screens. It's up near the Santa Susana Pass, if you know where that is. My son and I actually saw it break out. And again, it was another hot, windy, dry day. Fire proceeded left to right across the top of the Santa Susana Mountains. And this picture is looking southwest into the corner of my town. And you can see the fire there. It proceeded down the hill. Fire department was poised there and fought it off. It didn't get into the communities. The winds turned south back over the hill. It went down the hill into Thousand Oaks, burned or damaged hundreds of structures, continued south across the 101, up and over the hills and down into Malibu, and did the same sort of damage. We streamed this video for 36 hours, and Ben, who has a large Twitter following, pushed the URL out there, and quite a few people watched the fire off and on. And we heard back that they found it useful because it's obviously real time. And we streamed videos of other fires since then, nothing of the magnitude of this, but I did get this one. For those of you who know the area, this is the 118 freeway going through the Santa Susana Pass, and the fire broke out right down below where the camera is. So I got to get a good view of it, and not a big fire. If you look closely at the center of the picture, you can see the strike team that a previous helicopter had dropped off. They got it knocked down in about 45 minutes, but it was interesting to watch them. And a number of people watched it because I post the URLs on Facebook, and if it's a larger fire, out on the local email lists. So let's talk about messaging. That's another thing that a digital network is good for. Because if anybody's ever had to transcribe a list of 20 medicines over a voice channel, you know how agonizing and slow and error prone it can be. So if you can send it as a single page PDF, you're just that much better. So You can use standard email using standard email servers and clients using SMTP, which is the internet standard for email systems. SMTP is simple messaging transport protocol, but it's anything but simple. So you need a fairly talented Linux person to set that up. Once you have though, you can use Thunderbird against it. There's web clients. Roundcube has gotten quite good. But if any of you are running WinLink and AREDN networking are made for each other, and I'm going to talk more about that. If you're not familiar with WinLink, was originally designed for boaters using HF radios so they could exchange email. Originally, it was only on ALE radios, automatic link establishment. They're frequency agile radios that can move around as propagation dictates. Since then, they've added packet radio, robust packet, which I had to look up. Turns out it's proprietary to the vendor who makes Pactor modems. All of the Pactor modems, and I mentioned VARA earlier, there's a flavor for HF that's quite good. And RDOP is an older software modem. If you're into WinLink or interested in getting on WinLink HF, I saw an evaluation of the various HF methods of moving WinLink data. And while Pactor 4 was the best and should be at close to $2,000 for a modem, VARA HF was almost as good as Pactor 4 in most places. And it's $69 for the software license. And as I mentioned, RDOP's another older software modem, and it's rapidly falling out of favor. On VHF, you can go via packet radio, APRS, I mentioned VARA FM, and the AREDN networking, which has the advantage, in addition to being much faster, you don't need to define digipeating. The network knows the route. It knows how to get to the post office on the network. And WinLink has a large set of standard messaging templates, which they're always updating. We see a couple of updates automatically downloaded, gosh, 2 or 3 times a month. Things like Incident Command System, USGS, FEMA, and there's some local ones. You know, you can specialize them for your local community too. I stole this graphic off the WinLink website a couple of years ago, and it hadn't been updated, so I used my superior graphic skills to update it. So anyway, down at the connection layer for HF, I've added VARA and RDOP and took out WinMore, which is an even older protocol. And for VHF, I added VARA, and ham networking goes in that same layer, local routing. So this is the WinLink Express. This is the email client. It looks pretty much like any other email client. However, because you have to specify which protocol and which route you're taking, after you create the email, you have to define where you're sending it to, unlike the internet, because you always send your stuff to your email provider, which is typically your ISP. And up at the upper right, you can see where it says open session. This is where you pull down the session manager that defines whether you're going to send it out via packet, HF WinLink, VHF WinLink. You can do point-to-point, stuff like that. So it's a little complex. Here's the session manager for a networked post office. WinLink, obviously you can't send a 2 megabyte graphic over HF, so they do limit at the size of emails plus attachments to, I don't know, 22. I managed to get 22 kilobytes attached to this one, but I sent it over the WinLink network to a post office 3 hops away. Just said, send it to K6PVR-SVR. I didn't have to say, you know, hop through this mountain or anything. But what I've circled in red was the time to connect, transfer 22 kilobytes, and disconnect was 10 seconds total. Poof, done. You can move a lot of emergency traffic this way, just buckets and buckets of it. So if you're on WinLink, think about getting a mesh network connection. The number of post offices in Southern California, or on the network, I should say, kind of varies from week to week, but it's somewhere between 8 and 14. and some of them are local, some of them are distance. I just pick a local one that's pretty reliable and just send my mail out that way. Because it's the internet, you can hang anything off of it you want. This happens to be my weather station. I use an application called WeWX, WEEWX. It's open source software, runs on quite a few different operating systems. And because it's open software, people are always contributing to it, and it supports probably 1,000 different weather sensors and devices. It's highly recommended, not too hard to install. I take data off of a serial port on the side of my old weather station, and WeWX handles it just fine. I took this one, I don't know, late last month when we actually got some rain. It's not all about emergency communications. We hung a Scrabble server off the network and played Scrabble for a while. That was fun. BZ Flag is a tank shoot 'em up game, which I suck at, but it works well over the network, plenty of bandwidth. And once in a great while, after the Wednesday night nets, we play a couple hands of poker. So what's out there for equipment if you want to get on the network? The hardware that's supported by AREDN is mostly designed for outdoor use, with one important exception. So as you'd expect, it's weatherproof and it runs PoE, so you don't have to run a separate power cable up the mast. I am constantly amazed at the sophistication of the hardware you can buy for less than $100. These modems are amazing. They're software defined. They can do, up, I don't know, maybe almost 24 different modulation rates depending on the link quality. And there's 2 of them. Each transceiver and its respective modem and antenna are called a chain. We run MIMO dual chain. That's two separate transceiver chains. And almost all of them you would buy for your home have built-in gain antennas. Just a heads up, if you're thinking about heading over to eBay, if you go to the AREDN network, AREDN site, and I'll give that link later, there are a lot of older products that they still support. You can run them, but they don't recommend deploying them, buying them and deploying them for new implementations. Oh, and there's a lot of 802.11 AC models out there. They're not yet supported. That's in progress. Remember, I told you didn't have to hack. This is what you had to do when you did. This is about 2012. This is a Linksys WRT 54G running a very early version of broadband Hamnet, which was the successor to AREDN. In spite of having 2 antennas, it is not MIMO. Doesn't support 802.11n. And remember that 600 milliwatts I said it? We could put out, these put out 60. So you're 10 dB down right there before you even have to run cables to external antennas. So once AREDN came out and was implemented on commercial products, these pretty much died a quick death. So anyway, this is a Ubiquiti Nanostation M2 and M5 for 2 gigs and 5 gigs. A short haul, they work well. They've been supported for a long time. I'm not recommending them for new purchase anymore. If you have them laying around, feel free to go ahead and deploy them, but don't buy them new. After the AREDN devs did a pretty significant software upgrade, was that last October? I guess it was last October. Yeah, we called it Meshaween. We linked up a couple large networks and some other smaller networks over the internet to try and create a large network, and we got up to, in some places, 1,500 nodes, and the network handled it fine. The piece of hardware that did less fine were these Nanostations. It turns out they've got the slowest CPU of all the stuff AREDN currently supports for new purchase. They haven't disqualified this from new purchase yet. I have. That's my decision. Fortunately, there's better stuff. This is a Microtech SXT SQ5. I love their model numbers. This has the same beam width and gain as the Nanostation. but the CPU is 50% faster, and I think it has more RAM. I have one of these up on the tower on 2 gigs and it works fine. By the way, if you just buy it, you get the thing on the lower left and you end up clamping it to a post with a hose clamp. That's clumsy. For another $8 or $10, I recommend you buy their mast mount over here on the right. I really like these. So if you're a bit farther out, or you want to make sure you have really good gain, because there's no such thing as too much gain, on the left are the Ubiquiti Powerbeams. They come in the 300, 400, and the 620 millimeter scare your neighbor sizes. And they're right as the Microtech large head grid models. They're both very, very good. The guys like the Microtechs because they're very light, very little wind resistance. This is the node of choice when somebody's backfitting their Go box with digital. The only knock against them I've heard, and it doesn't apply here to us, is that if you live in an area with heavy icing, you might not want to buy one of the Microtechs because it's probably not quite as durable for icing as one of the Powerbeams might be. Another recent recommendation, this is a Microtech QRT5. This is a flat panel antenna. It's less than a foot on a side, but it has the same 24 dBi gain as the big dishes and a 10-degree beam width. You can reach out and smack someone from a long distance away with this. Recommended. I'm going to start recommending these for our hilltop sites. So if you're in an HOA, here's the solution. They're allowed to let you put up a satellite dish and nobody will know that it's not pointed at a synchronous satellite. That's a little Microtech light dish feed for 5 gigahertz there. Over and above that, you have to buy the little universal adapter, the black plastic adapter you can see there. It's $8 at Amazon. And the LDF prices have probably gone up some, but last time I looked, it was about $40. So a good economical high gain solution there if you need it. A couple pictures, these are older, of a couple user sites. On the left side, K1GGS has 2 network nodes. One's on 2 gig and one's on 5 gig. Why would you do that? Well, the site he's linked to is about 4 miles away from him and has user access points for 2 gig and 5 gig. So if one of those goes down, he still has network connectivity. We try to do this at any served agency, either frequency diversity, or if they have happen to see 2 hilltop nodes in different points of the compass, we might consider doing that. By the way, we're not deploying any new 2 gig high level mountaintop nodes. It's only 1 channel and it's a little too limiting. So we've gone pretty much all 5 gigs. On the right is a 5 gig Nanostation above a Microtech dish. And why would somebody do anything like that? Well, it turns out there's another ham. This is in the San Fernando Valley. There's another ham just east of this location who's in the shadow of Verdugo Peak. So this nice guy has a dish pointing at Verdugo Peak and the Nanostation on a different channel, providing a feed over to the guy so he can get on the network. I didn't mention it, but the Nanostation is just about the only device that AREDN supports that has 2 Ethernet connections. You can run your Ethernet up to the main port on the Nanostation, loop it back out of the secondary and feed the Microtech both data and voice. So you only have to run 1 cable up. This sort of configuration is really popular for Go kits when the dish here might be hooked to the mesh network, the AREDN network, and the Nanostation isn't running AREDN, it's running a plain old Part 15 user access point. So you can let people with their cell phones link up to it using Part 15 non-ham and give them an extension off the PBX or some other point-to-point cell phone to cell phone utility that they might not have access to if the telephone network was down in the area. Excuse me. Okay, this is the one device that isn't meant to go outside, obviously. This is a Microtech AC Light 5-port router, or it was a 5-port router in a previous life running the original OS. You put this in your shack, and this provides a seamless way to integrate the mesh network in your home network. This is almost universally the second thing someone buys when they get on the mesh network. Cable on port 5 provides power plus DTD, which is device to device. That's the node to node protocol, because they're both nodes, and goes out to your external outside node linking to the ham network. Port 1 down at the bottom goes to your home network. That way anything on ports 2, 3, and 4 has access to both the mesh network and the ham network. And if you happen not to have any access to the ham radio network, in other words, nothing on port 5, port 1 is how you tunnel out to the internet. So everything on ports 2, 3, and 4 still has access to the ham radio network, even though there's no RF link. Highly recommended. $50 or so, plus or minus inflation. The vast majority of the equipment I've shown you so far isn't suitable for hilltops. Just like you wouldn't put a Baofeng in a production repeater, Baofeng handy-talkie. A lot of those devices aren't appropriate for hilltops. So anyway, this is a sector antenna, Ubiquiti in this case. It's called a sector because it covers 120 degrees of the compass rose. Inside that housing is a 120 degree sector that's vertically polarized, and another 120 degree sector antenna that's the other polarization, whatever I said. In other words, there's 220 degree antennas there. Hung off the back is a Rocket M5. It's a Ubiquiti 5 gigahertz radio, and you can see the two coax jumpers linking the two together. This is what you put on a hilltop when you want to illuminate a direction of the compass. If it turns out that 120 degrees isn't enough, you don't use an Omni because they have their own sets of issues in a network. You use 220 degrees, overlap them, or point them in different directions on different channels, and you bring them down to a network switch where they exchange data that way on a wire. So it's the network and radio of choice. And here you can see three of them. They look fatter because these particular three are in metal housings that prevent stray RF from getting out. One of them's on 2 gigs, one's on 3 gigs, one's on 5 gigs. This is overlooking, it's in somewhere in North Orange County at a undisclosed location because it's the ownership of the site is fuzzy and it's a quarter-mile hike off of the nearest dirt road anyway. Battery and solar powered. The little bullet camera down at the bottom is looking back at the solar panel array and batteries behind us. He doesn't have a weather station there, but he does have a clock type thermometer bolted to the solar panels, and the camera is focused on it so you can tell how hot it is up there. I guess you could call this a small site. It's pretty versatile. I don't know if this is medium to large. This is one of the ones I take care of. On the container at the left, there's a 4-pole supporting a UHF repeater, boring, and a UHF Yagi, it's a repeater linking antenna. The stuff on the left side is all county stuff. Don't care about that. On the top of the tower is a UHF antenna for a UHF repeater. Have 2 gig and 5 gig mesh network access points. There's a part 15 access point up there and a 3 gigahertz sector antenna that I use for linking the three sites surrounding my my valley together as kind of a local backbone. The little dish is a test dish. It's hardly ever used. The big dish is our backbone link pointing west back towards the rest of the county. You can't see it from this photo, but there's a set of stairs in between those rocks that goes up to a higher plateau. There's a much larger container up there supporting a number of repeater systems, but there's also a telephone pole with a similar dish pointing east, which continues the backbone east to the dish antenna shown right here at the corner of the container. This is on Verdugo Peak. This is a darn site. disaster area repeater network. Most of you are probably familiar with them. They have, I think, 46 repeaters scattered around 26 sites around Southern California and other points. They've been very gracious in letting us co-occupy some of their sites. In spite of all of the aluminum on top of the container there, only 3 of them are with our AREDN network. I think it's these 2 here and this one here. 5 gig pointing south, 5 gig sector antenna. Excuse me, 5 gig sector antenna pointing west and a 2 gig sector antenna pointing west. Their microwave links here continue east to Mount Wilson and Loop Canyon, and we ride across those also. This picture, if you're interested, this picture was taken right after a windstorm that hit their HF remote antenna. It's since been repaired, took another bad windstorm, which destroyed it completely, and it's down, and I think they'll replace it. So this is definitely a large site. This is on Pleasants Peak in Orange County. Excuse me. The owner of the site is ham friendly, fortunately, and one of the lead developers lives close by. So he's had the ability over the last 5 or 6 years to deploy various gear here. All the stuff you can see in yellow. Not shown in this picture, down below the bottom of the picture, there are 3 or 4 dish antennas going at various points of the compass, linking various sites together. So this is a major communications hub. So this is not your handy-talkie to handy-talkie type stuff. This is serious repeater system type stuff. So you know where you live and you know where the other side is. Can they see each other? There are all sorts of tools. HeyWhat'sThat.com is easy to use. It'll show your coverage. ISP design is UI is Ubiquiti's site, and it's pretty easy to use. Scadacore, just you put in 2 lats and lawns and it shows you whether they have line or sight. It's pretty easy. Radio Mobile has a 200-page manual. Enough said. I've played with it a couple times, but the other tools meet my requirements. And additionally, there's a Fresnel zone calculator at Radio Fresnel. On a point-to-point link, the radiation expands as it goes, and then it contracts halfway through, and that's called the Fresnel zone. And if you have anything impinging into that Fresnel zone, it degrades the signal. The higher the frequency, the narrower the Fresnel zone is, but it's still, if you have a link that's just barely line of sight, you might want to check this site out and see if you're going to have an issue. So here's a screenshot of HeyWhat'sThat.com. The site with the purple X is known as Gravel Peak. It's south of Lompoc. They got on the air with an access point, I don't know, 4 months or so ago. And one of the guys who wanted to get on is up here in Vandenberg Village. He's only 6 or 7 miles away, but he was concerned whether he had line of sight or not. And it says there's coverage there. And this is the elevation map that shows that, in fact, he does. Now, none of these tools know about buildings or vegetation, so you'll have to make that determination yourself. Eric, KG6WXC, the ham I mentioned earlier, wrote a network crawler, a network mapper. Each node has a text file. Well, it's JSON now, but a file of vital information about the node. Version of the hardware, version of the software, how long it's been running, and more importantly, all the things it's linked to and the quality of the links. And he gathers up all that data as he crawls the network and saves it in a database. If the node has latitude and longitude configured in it, he can place it on a map. The software is open source, so various groups have grabbed it and deployed it on their networks. And I was able to grab some screenshots of some of those where they've pushed it out to the internet. And this is Oregon, and you see they've got a fairly good link going. All of these dual purplish bluish lines are internet tunnels in order to get on. The green is radio links. Orange is 5 gig, purple is 2 gig, blue is 3 gig, and these gray ones are probably Microtechs. They have no gigs. In other words, no RF. So that's Oregon. This is the Bay Area. In 2019, none of this existed, late 2019. At the time of Pacificon, I gave a presentation there, October of 2019, and I got mugged out in the hallway afterwards, guys wanting for more information. And they were fortunate enough to have a cache of used gear, large cache from a WISP. Plus they got an ARDC grant to buy some other gear. And they pretty much just gave anything that anybody wanted to them and let them put it out. And as a result, their network is unplanned. And so they have some congestion issues, and they're working to set up a couple of backbones. I think one's East Bay and one's West Bay. I'm not sure. But they've got lots of activity. So here's the, as far as I know, the big daddy. We happen to have a couple of AREDN developers in Southern California, so we got a head start. Because they all have latitude and longitude, I was able to pick all the nodes from Atascadero, that area south of the Mexican border, and west from San Luis Obispo east to Lake Havasu, and I came up with about 450 nodes. That's ground level and hilltop level. If we zoom in kind of local to your area, you can see there's still quite a good bit going. One of these is, I believe this is Pleasant's Peak, and I forget what this one is. But anyway, those are two major hilltop nodes here. And over here, this is Odom. Anyway, it's a hill that covers all of this here. So there's lots of opportunities to get connected. Where do you get information? At the AREDN website, arednmesh.org. And not arden.org. There's a whole history there. It's not the true AREDN site anymore. arednmesh.org. That list of supported products, buy off of that, please do. And don't buy any that are no longer recommended. Those have a light green background, and it says that. You can get software downloads there, the production and nightly builds. I want to talk about that a little bit. Up until 2022, I usually recommended people get the nightly builds because the production builds can be up to a year and a half old, and in between they'll fix software bugs, they'll add support for new products, things like that. And it's always worthwhile to grab the nightly build. At the start of this year, I told everybody, hold off on the nightly builds, at least at sites where you'd have to climb up a tower to get to it if you bricked it, because they've undertaken a multi-phase project to overhaul the code. And it was moderately unstable early on. They've finished the first phase, and I'm now recommending people use nightly builds again because it's faster, lighter. They fixed a number of long-term bugs, added some enhancements too. They're getting ready, perhaps in the next month, to release as a production build and start phase 2, which I think is overhauling a user interface, completely different. So anyway, you're good with either production, or I recommend nightly builds. There's how-tos, FAQs, and the bulk of those have been rolled into some online documentation. It's been about 2 years now. Steve, AB7PA, took his arm, put his arms around all the documentation, was scattered all over, and created some formal documentation that starts from, here's what it's all about, here's the products, here's how you load the gear, because the different gear has different loading procedures for the first build, for first installation. Microtech is different from Ubiquiti, which is different from TP-Link. After you have the AREDN software loaded, updates are all the same. Anyway, the documentation is well worth skimming top to bottom, just so you get a feel for what's there. The AREDN website has forums, over almost 4,000 members. It's edging up there. They're moderately active. Registration is free. I recommend you jump on there, because once you're signed in, there's a place that you can pick new posts and see what's been posted since you came on. anywhere from 0 to a half a dozen posts a day, depending on what's going on. Some very smart people there. There's an unofficial page on Facebook I help manage. There's about 1,700 members there. And you can get YouTube videos. There's lots of videos about ham radio networking. The little asterisk there is to remind me to tell you that there's a lot of old videos out there. This stuff's changing fairly steadily. And if you come across a YouTube video that's older than about 3 years, maybe take it a pass and look for something more current. I've dropped notes to several of the guys who've posted links on how to install broadband hamnet on WRT54Gs and recommend they pull them down, but I don't know if I've had any success or not. You can also get from me, I have a beginner's guide PDF that's kind of a summary of this. Excuse me, and I have a PDF version of a similar presentation. You'll notice I put up a lot of slides that were just pictures. They wouldn't be very useful in a PDF without some verbiage. And in this presentation, I've added all of that verbiage in, considerably longer, more detailed. But still, I recommend the online docs at AREDN. If you want to look at the SoCal network map, here's a shortened version, short url.at/go capital K29. And that will take you to Eric's SoCal mesh map. And I didn't mention it on the map. You can click on a node and it'll pop up a window where you get all the vital details. Call sign, where it's at, how long it's been up, who it's talking to. Pretty useful. Any questions?
Wow, that was a lot of information, Orv. So
I know. We can crawl the network and bang around, or we can take questions, or whatever you want to do. Oh, I do have a couple things out on the network I'd like to show you before or after questions. Up to you, Albert.
So at this, yeah, go ahead.
Will you email those PDFs to the group?
Who should I email them to?
To Albert at, it would be, and I can send this to you, or if you want to write acgonzo@gmail.com.
Typical spelling of Gonzo?
Yeah.
At which?
At Gmail.
I'll send them. Turns out the PDF is a lot smaller than the PowerPoint, so I can email it. Let me share something else. Can I do that?
Oh, yes, please.
Let's see here. I'll go right back in this. So let me get this over here. So here are, video is pretty useless if you want to watch a waving screen, a waving field of grass, but it uses bandwidth and there's no point in it. So what I do is establish a website in various places and take a screenshot every 5 minutes. And these are the local ones. I'm kind of proud of this one. I mentored the Central California guys over the last 6 months, and they were bequeathed some of the gear from San Francisco, and they've managed to put up stuff, and they're very busy doing it. And they established a Raspberry Pi, and I put up a page with some of their cameras. This is Paso Robles. That's looking east into Paso Robles. This is it's a personal site. The guy has a cell tower on his site, and he makes buckets of money renting to cell carriers. Place has got 2 huge ham antennas. Google Radio Ranch if you want. This one here, Clark Valley. This is looking kind of northwest. This is Los Osos. And sticking up out of the clouds, you can see Morro Rock next to Morro Bay. This guy lives in Pismo Heights, which is on the north end of Pismo Beach. So it's a nice day there. This is Lompoc Valley. This is a place called Gravel Peak. It's looking north into the Lompoc Valley. And he liked it so much, he bought a pan-tilt zoom camera that's on patrol over the course of 500 seconds. it rotates to 10 different places. So I have no idea where this is looking, but it looks like it's looking out over the ocean. So you can do those. Here's my weather station. We could get on Team Talk, but I don't think there's any point for that. Point is, there's a lot going on out there. Did I stop share? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Back to you, Albert.
All right, thank you. So just a couple questions I have between the nodes and the internet portion. What level or what is the security mechanism that keeps traffic going from the internal or person's network through the node?
There's a full set of firewalls built into the AREDN code.
Okay, so the AREDN code prohibits the traffic from flowing into the AREDN network.
The stuff you have plugged into the node can access the mesh network. The mesh network can only access things you authorize in the AREDN code, which would be like a Raspberry Pi in your shack for your weather station or whatever. It's all configurable.
Okay. All right. Interesting to that. And
if
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, and if did I forget to mention anything?
No, I think you pretty much did the overview of the network.
Okay.
No, I think we're pretty good unless people have questions. I mean, the way I get into the network is I'm in an RF desert here. So I have a friend who lives in Los Alamitos, and I stuck up a Microtech dish on his tower. So I tunnel to him from here, and that's how I get on the network. So even if you are in an RF desert, you can still get on somehow. And for a long time, Orv was kind enough to allow me to tunnel through him. But finally, I got my own RF node going.
A remote RF node.
Yes.
So,
I guess that's legit.
I would say if you're in an RF desert, then phone a friend. Have a friend that is connected.
Yes, doesn't even have to be a friend. You could tunnel to Arkansas if you wanted, but it'd be nicer to tunnel locally.
Yeah, about 6 months, no, less than that. There's a group called the OC Mesh Network. OC Mesh Group. I forget the name of the two guys that kind of run it.
Well, Don Hill's one of them.
Don. And anyway, it doesn't matter. They recently put up a couple of nodes on Los Alamitos Medical Center. That popped up about 4 months ago or so. So my dish turned 180 degrees from Mount Wilson towards the Los Al Medical Center. And it's only about an 800-meter hop. And the best part was on Mark's roof, my friend's tower, didn't have to do any, pinpoint accuracy. I just turned it around because I could see the medical center, line of sight, and boom, I was in.
I have a question. I have a Linksys WRT54G with the old broadband ham mesh or hamnet or whatever it was. I mean, do I throw that away?
You can't use it on the mesh network direct. Well, here's the deal. You can put the broadband hamnet code on it, and they do have a tunnel module you can install there, and you could cable it onto the network. But the CPU is so slow, it probably couldn't handle the volume of traffic. It won't install the AREDN code. It only has 4 megs of flash. What you could do, let me talk a little bit about here. I didn't mention it, but in addition to the features I talked about with the HAP AC in your shack, it has a 2 gig and a 5 gig internal radio. And those can be set up as wireless access points. But their internal antenna is horribly inefficient. And I set up one as a part 15 access point, for my laptop. But my HAP is a foot off the floor in a far corner of the garage, so the coverage was lousy. So what I did was I took a plain old wireless access point, turned off his DHCP server, stuck it in the far opposite corner of the garage, which is in the center of the house on a high shelf, and ran an Ethernet cable from there to the HAP. So it becomes my wireless access point for the mesh network for the house. You could do the same thing with your WRT54G, flash it back original and use it as your wireless access point. In other words,
Right.
it's a part 15 wireless access point that connects devices to the mesh network, like your phone. Does that make sense?
I'm gonna have to think about it.
Okay, well, ping me if you've got questions.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
This is W6LIK Midge from Seal Beach. We have a Gary XE6IXK who has been installing dishes all around Seal Beach. I know Boeing Building, the police department. My question is, who is funding this? Who is funding this? I mean, these towers are huge. Where does the money come from and how does that work? Thank you, W6LIK.
It's all over the map. Your home installation can be self-funded. One of these dishes is the cost of maybe 3 Baofeng handy talkies. Then you add the AREDN HAP AC Light in the shack. That's $50. And honestly, you'll pay more for the outdoor Ethernet cable connecting the two together. As far as hilltop sites, some of them are funded by groups like repeater groups, similar to repeater groups. Site access is an ongoing issue, not just for AREDN, for repeater systems. Pretty much every repeater site is almost always an endangered species because the site might sell, but a new owner might not want hams on his site or something like that. Some of them will allow free access, in other words, no rent, if you show that you're providing emergency communications. Other site rentals will go from, well, at the one site, we get a 50% discount, so it's only $600 a year. So we established a 501c3 because our network was just getting too big. We get donations and those help the operational funds. Like I said, it's all over the map. A lot of sites like hospitals will let you put stuff up for free because it's emergency communications. And the gear itself is not that expensive, unless you're talking about occupying mesh on a new hilltop that has no radios on it, no infrastructure. Put a container up there, solar, batteries, tower. I mean, you're talking several $1,000s. That's a major, major effort. So, like I said, the whole spectrum. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Your presentation was just spectacular.
Oh, I've never had anybody use that word before. Thank you.
So Orv, on lightning protection, grounding for these externals, do you want to talk about that real quick?
We do it on all the mountaintops. Nobody
Okay.
does it ground level. Ubiquiti recommends running shielded cable. But here in Southern California, where we have such a benign environment, I don't, and I've never lost a node. In order to ground it, you have to run shielded cable. A couple of the brands have a ground screw inside their housing. And if they provide that, I'll ground it to the tower. But other than that, I don't run shielded cable. Maybe call me lucky, but I've never lost anything to even static.
All right.
If you like computers and you like ham radio, this stuff's the ideal conjunction. It's just a lot of fun.
And it's gone through enough iterations that it's the code base and everything is pretty stable and easy to install.
The code base is stable, even the nightly builds, because if we put out they put out a nightly build, typically it's a 1 or 2 line change to fix a small bug or add a feature, change, fix a typo. So yes, it's stable, easy to install. Depends on who you ask. Some people struggle mightily, others don't have any problem. But typically, if you RTFM, the instructions are step by step. I know guys who've struggled for weeks because they skipped one line in the instructions. I know one personally because I've had to mentor him. He insists on skipping that step. That's the one end of that says on a Microtech, after you upload the ELF file, you immediately have to upload the flash file.
Right,
They
right.
skip that, they configure it, they reboot it, and poof, it's back to the original software because of what we got before. Anyway.
The only issue I really had was just finding an RF link, you know, a clear line of sight RF. Originally, I was beaming to Mount Wilson from LaSalle, and it wasn't very stable or efficient.
That is
So
a long haul.
yeah.
Yeah, just FYI, we only put up the Mount Wilson nodes because they were the first ones in LA that would provide some coverage. They are not optimal. They should not be that high. You should be working towards a cellular concept. You know, if you got a high building in your city, put nodes there on a specific channel for that city and then link out otherwards. Hub and spoke, cellular. We've been looking for an alternate lower level backbone across LA County since we put Wilson up. As soon as we have it, I'm going to take a gun and shoot those two nodes up there.
But then Gary, who Mitch mentioned, you know, has been putting up nodes in the Orange County area, Los Alamitos, Seal Beach area, and then, you know, one popped up on the medical center on the top of a building, which works great, which is brilliant.
Yes, that's the way to do it. If we have to build a semi-ground level backbone with 20 hops, so what? You know, typically emergencies are only local. You need this network to cover 20 or 30 miles around. You don't need to talk to, I don't know, Paso Robles in an emergency, typically. Now, building big networks is fun, but it's not the core of MCOM.
Or you mentioned a lot of the nodes that are along the coastal areas from basically San Francisco down through Lompoc, down in Orange County. I'm here in Upland at the base of Mount Baldy, right on the LA County, San Bernardino County line. Are there networks nodes out here in my direction towards Loma Linda, Moreno Valley?
I seem to recall seeing Loma Linda. Drop me an email and a reminder and I'll do a network scan. How's that?
All right, because this is all new to me and I'm fascinated by it. But it's like right now I'm trying to point, you know, first step, what do I do? And what's in my area? So I'll send you an email.
Sure. First step for anybody who's interested, go out and buy the HAP AC Light. You'll use it whether you have an RF link or not. That'd be the first thing to get going and you can get familiar. And you can tunnel with it until you get your RF link going.
Perfect.
I should recommend that.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation.
That's exactly what I did. Hap Light, tunnel straight to Orv for like a year or so, and then bought another one and a couple of dishes. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
You said purchase what? A half light? What?
HAP.
Microtech HAP, HAP, AC Light. If you go to AREDNmesh.org on the product support matrix, it's called out there. In fact, they even have a link that will take you to Amazon.
Okay, I'm on your site and it's where?
AREDNmesh.org.
Yes.
Hang on, let me go there.
Home software docs, forum, blah, blah, blah.
It's under software supported platform matrix.
Okay.
And it is, you can see on the left, it's about 4 rows down, HAP AC Light.
Yes.
Scroll to the right, in the green background, you see RB 9.2. Click on that link and it'll take you to
Amazon.
There you go. $45.78. It's 6% off. Go for it.
Woohoo. We scored.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing you did, huh?
Well, not
Okay.
me, but I recommend it for anybody. This became available a few years after I was into networking, and prior to that, you had to configure a smart switch with VLANs, and it was messy. It's all coded in the AREDN code.
Pretty good price. It's about the same as a quarter tank of gas.
Oh, serious? Well, yeah, that's true.
Hey, end off, Albert, maybe we ought to set up some sort of network here inland, you know, around through Catalina. Does AREDN have any special events going? Like, say, we got field day coming up. Do they do anything special?
Well, they're more local than anything else. During the
Yeah.
pandemic, we held an online Zoom presentation. What's coming up next in July is the Southern California Linux Expo, SCALE. And we have a ham radio and Linux presentation. And I usually give this overview in that. And one of the developers comes and we're trying to get some other stuff. Let me get that link for you. Where is it here? I don't think they have the sessions up yet.
Y'all can see you have nothing to do.
I'm glad I retired a couple years ago. This stuff has just exploded.
That's on my bucket list, retirement.
Recommended, finest kind. But I'd skip the back surgery and the knee replacement surgery. You know. So any questions, email me or Enduf. He knows about as much as I do. He can certainly provide you local guidance.
Yep, happy to do so.
Is that it, Albert? I think we're done.
I think we did. And Midge, you still have your hand up. Did you have anything else before?
No,
Oh,
thank
yeah.
you. I'm sorry. I thought I took it down. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I should have taken it down after the question. Sorry. All right, everybody. Thank you very much to Orv for a wonderful presentation. I have the recording, and what we'll do is make that available with the links and the text. The chat will be available with the links, and we'll present that, and then we'll have other conversations. Net at 9 can probably, talk about these things deeper. Our 620 nets on Tuesday night, we can talk about this as well. So thanks, Orv, for the presentation. Thanks, Enduf, for organizing it and putting everything together. And thanks, everybody, for joining us today. It was wonderful and a great opportunity to learn and grow. So thank you.